Good evening. It's that point in the flight when even nervous flyers tend to relax. Germanwings Flight 9525 from Barcelona to Dusseldorf had just reached cruise level, 38,000 feet, as it sailed high over the French Alps. Whatever happened next was sudden, and it forced the plane into a rapid but apparently controlled descent from which it never recovered. Tonight, bits of debris are littered across the remote mountainside where the plane crashed. There is not one intact piece of wing or fuselage, said one official. Anguished relatives of the 150 people on board were told there are not expected to be any survivors. We have a team in place covering this horrible tragedy, starting with Bill Neely in southern France. Bill?
Good evening, Lester. This is a crash that has experts baffled. A plane flying apparently normally in good weather that suddenly plummets more than 30,000 feet in 10 minutes. Unimaginable for those on board. I'm at rescue headquarters today, high up in these mountains. The search began for clues and for the dead. On a rugged French mountainside, in thousands of scattered pieces, the remains of a crashed plane. Here and there, rescuers. But there was no one left alive to rescue. The Airbus, with 150 people on board, had simply disintegrated on impact. Searchers, though, did find the cockpit voice recorder. This was the doomed aircraft operated by the low-cost airline Germanwings. Flight 9525 took off from Barcelona at 10 this morning, climbing normally to a cruising altitude of 38,000 feet at 10:27. But minutes later, it began an unexplained descent over the Alps for 8 minutes. The pilots sent no distress signal. Flight Radar 24 says it lost contact with the plane, which had dropped more than 30,000 feet, at 10:40. I heard the noise of the impact, this man says. Then we saw smoke and thought the flight must have crashed. At Dusseldorf, where the plane was due to land, distressing scenes as waiting relatives were told the news. On board were 144 passengers, 2 pilots and 4 flight crew. Among them, at least 67 passengers from Germany and 45 from Spain. There were 2 babies and 16 teens from the same school in Germany who'd been on an exchange holiday. Also, 2 famous opera singers who'd been performing in Barcelona. Helicopters and hundreds of searchers have moved close to the crash site. Their priority, recovering bodies and the second flight recorder. Neither weather nor terrorism is being blamed, but for now, nothing explains why the plane fell so far so fast with such terrible consequences. Bill Neely, NBC News, Seine-les-Alpes, France.
This is Tom Costello. The disaster now strewn over the French Alps may have started at or near 38,000 feet. The plane only spent 1 to 3 minutes at that altitude before beginning what appears to be a programmed descent 4,000 feet per minute. Unusually steep, but not extreme. What puzzles veteran crash investigators is why the crew never radioed a mayday.
They didn't provide a distress call. They didn't indicate in any kind of way, shape, or form a problem with the aircraft. That's very unusual given the fact that they were at 38,000 feet. They would have been in complete communication with air traffic control.
Among the scenarios investigators will have to consider, was there an emergency that forced the crew to program a rapid descent, a fire or smoke or a sudden loss of cabin pressure? But if that was the problem, the pilot should have leveled the plane out at 10,000 feet where there's plenty of oxygen. Instead, it kept descending. So were the pilots and passengers somehow incapacitated, perhaps from lack of oxygen? Captain John Cox once flew the A320.
Something obviously occurred that said as soon as they got to 38,000, within just a few minutes, they needed to come down. And what exactly that is, I don't know.
The Airbus A320 is among the world's most heavily used planes, more than 6,000 flying. A computerized plane with a very good safety record, but there have been some recent high-profile accidents. In December, an Air Asia A320 crashed into the Java Sea, killing 162 on board. The cause is still under investigation. And in 2009, the miracle on the Hudson in New York caused by a bird strike. Everyone survived thanks to some expert piloting.
This particular Airbus A320 was 24 years old, had just gone through a maintenance check yesterday. They're now going to have to look at what the cockpit voice recorder says and the flight data recorder. Those 2 black boxes may be the tale of what happened to this flight. Lester?
All right, Tom Costello.